Jazz Cabbage Cafe, Adam Brook, Rick Thompson, and we'll get into some cannabis stuff, and hopefully we can more cannabis people. That sounds like Adam's torch. He's frozen with his torch. Moves on.
That's,
Work will call him out.
can you not mute him from the dashboard?
I can, but I just was enjoying it for a second.
You were enjoying the blow. Okay.
Frozen? I know that it's you were, except for the torch. I know that it's super political, and we have a huge divide. Say it again, Adam.
Oh.
You're glitching out pretty bad, Adam, right now.
You're glitching.
Might need to come back in. Go ahead, Jim.
Nothing.
Here you go. I can hear you. A former president was arrested again. It's the second time he's been arrested. He was impeached twice during his first term. Just so many facts surrounding it. And again, I know that there's a little sensitivity for some people still support him or think that he's being ganged up on or would like to see other people get in trouble or something instead of him. But the guy is getting called out for a lot, and the indictments and the charges, civil suits, his business being considered a criminal enterprise. There's ensuing suit there. There's probably going to be charges for the Georgia issue with election tampering. New York has got its state charges going on, and it's historic and just wild that it's going on in this day and age. And I know it's not directly connected to what we talk about, but I find it to be pretty intense.
Very newsworthy. Even if you don't want to believe that Donald Trump is guilty of anything, what you have to do is take a look at all the people around him that have been convicted of crimes. His former chief of staff, Walton Attu is now about to get gone, Rudy Giuliani, all of these other people, including folks that he himself had to pardon as a president. So when you look at all the people that have been ensnared in bad misdeeds around Trump, it's pretty easy, actually, intellectually, to believe that he's capable of some of the things that he's done. And the evidence presented in the charges was actually quite damning. In addition to the photos, the details of obstruction of justice, moving documents in order to foil the efforts of federal investigators.
Very, very sensitive documents.
You cannot do that. I don't care who you are. So there has to be a reckoning. There has to be.
Even harsh critics of this system and staunch supporters of Trump have looked at this indictment and seen how tight and detailed it is, and have said this looks bad for Donald Trump.
Of course, the timing is very unfortunate in the fact that he's a candidate for president, which gives some of his supporters additional ammunition to say that this is a politically charged prosecution and that it's not a legitimate cause and that he's not actually accused of selling anything to anybody. He's just accused of taking and keeping. But the reality is, when you refuse to comply with the federal subpoena and actually talk about destroying documents, that's mob behavior. You want to behave like a hood, you get treated like a hood. So, and I understand people might have a different opinion, but the evidence presented is pretty significant. Not the first time that the president's been arrested. He was indicted and arrested earlier this year on charges that he fraudulently made business records in order to conceal hush money payments to Stormy Daniels, a person with whom he had an affair. So,
and that was a finance campaign violations because the payoff was to stay quiet so that it didn't affect the campaign.
Mm-hmm. There are several other cases still pending against the former president, including a Georgia election interference. And we all remember that phone call where he said, all I need you to do is to find me X number of votes in order to try and get the election commission to switch that state's vote over to a Trump support. And then also in the January 6th issue, which is so complicated as to not merit a whole lot of discussion here because you can't get into the whole thing. Hey, Trish.
And Amy, you guys are welcome to come on if you want to talk about. I know there's some legislative discussions you guys may have upcoming, and if there's anything there to discuss, feel free to come on if you want to weigh in on any of this. This isn't directly related, but man, just intense. So we have to at least acknowledge it. And nothing like this has happened before. So yes, while there is this idea that he's a candidate and you shouldn't be messing with him, no other candidate ever has had this type of background leading up to this scenario. So you can't really compare it to anything else. You can't expect those same considerations.
And at some point, even the most jaded person has to look at this and say, "Wow, this is just inconvenient timing." This is how the case evolved. This is where it started, and then it's progressed all the way through. No one planned out 2 years ago that when they started this whole thing, this was going to screw up somebody's chance to be president. That was never an intention. So this is the normal way things play out. And we know, those of us in the cannabis industry who've seen our brothers go to federal prison, we know that the federal system sometimes takes weird time frames. So it is a momentous moment.
Kansas would like to step up and lead our nation.
Yeah. Right now, it's crazy if you look at the number of Republican contenders, because typically when you have an ex-president or someone with that strong of a reputation running, you wouldn't see a whole lot of other people jump in because it would be, they know there's no chance. But now there's like 11.
I'm a Bernie fan. Yeah, guys that were supporting him heavily are criticizing him mercilessly.
Yeah. So politics right now is on a national level is so fucked up. We talk about with cannabis in respect to that. Even Biden's recent effort to empower research for the cannabis industry. 6 months down the road, just got a report card, 0 new projects, nothing's going on. And oh, by the way, they're now going to allow Colombian cannabis to be imported to the United States to be used in a pharmaceutical trial because they don't want to use domestically produced cannabis.
You can get it from Amsterdam or something too, if not from Missouri or the six. Now they went from 1 to like 6 strains or something. But Cass joins us. Cass Coleman, how you doing?
I'm great.
Of course, been on the show before, but it's been a little while. And glad to have you back on, though.
Thanks for inviting me.
And we are currently getting a little bit off subject and just talking about the intensity of this Trump scenario. Having been arrested today, more indictments, that type of stuff. Just unprecedented, so we thought we'd acknowledge it. And,
it's a global story, really is.
Yeah, I was listening to it on the BBC last night at like midnight, and I was like, yep, now we're just going to be like every other country out there where we have to prosecute our leaders.
That's unfortunate that we put trust in people that were so unworthy, though, right? That's really the thing.
Yeah, it's
And he gets in because people are so hungry for a change on some levels,
A very populist theme that he was running, and at that particular time, certainly there were a lot of calls for that too. And then, of course, Comey's report on Hillary Clinton just literally days before the election absolutely affected her electability in those critical days just before people were casting votes. So a lot of things led to Trump's election.
3 million less popular votes.
But he had the largest inauguration party in the history of DC, right? I mean, they were lined all the way up back down.
I still struggle with the idea that we can acknowledge that there were 3 million less votes, but that still means like several tens of millions of Americans thought that this was a vote that they wanted to cast. And not only did they think that they wanted to do it, but they took the action and actually went to the ballot box and did it. It makes the country seem very divided at times.
Yeah, and it was less the second time around, but there was still a huge amount.
Right.
Same idea. Yep.
Well, and we're
Indeed.
seeing young people register to vote because they want to support the issues that are important to them, including Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ issues, as well as gun control issues too. A lot of young people have unfortunately grown up in a culture now where they were taught how to avoid getting shot when they went to school every day, and those people are speaking out. So we're registering a lot of folks to vote, and I think that's fantastic. We need more people participating in the system. We saw when Barack Obama was elected president, there was a huge surge of people registering to vote for the first time as well. I think whenever there's big momentous change, I think people surge, people show up. I hope so.
Man, there's been some things tested throughout the last
Indeed.
few years here, and
Yeah, norms have been broken.
And I don't know if you guys saw, but in Michigan, like more people showed up statistically than the rest of the country. It's what are you guys doing that's special here in Michigan?
Well, certainly the Democratic voters showed up because in Michigan, although we were expected to not do very well, Democrats took the House and the Senate both, as well as the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, and the governorship. So all of those people that showed up really expressed a big point. The Republican Party was such a shambles now with Christine Caramano that's in charge of it now. Michigan Republican Party is really in a wreck. Plus, they're trying to sort out their own issue. They just came to a decision about how they're going to do primary voting, and 10% or 10 of the 36 votes will be decided by the voters, and then 26 of the 36 votes will be decided by delegates. So it's going to be a while before they're competitive in my mind.
well, and I just want to add the fixing the districts or having getting rid of the gerrymandering. I don't know if they were fixed. Some people still complain about them, but getting rid of some of the gerrymandering districts, I think, helped out.
You know what I would really like to talk about, and I've mentioned this to Jamie before, and it's kind of avoided us being brought up on the show. Hop latent virus. Cass, you know a little bit about this, don't you?
This is a great topic. I love
I
this
know it
topic.
is. I know it is. It's a scary topic, and it's a wide ranging topic, but that could potentially devastate entire state crops or an entire national crop.
And so, just
Yeah,
just want to say, Cass, just for people to know that you have a background in pharmacology and with science at large, working with labs and cannabis and other things, but with cannabis for many years in different capacities, and that type of thing. And you were the head of the science committee for the National Cannabis Industry Association, for a while.
indeed.
You came to
Yeah,
Michigan,
I
got a
just
lab
got,
started here, et cetera, et cetera. So just to give people a little background when you weigh in on this.
Yeah, I mean, I've been actively commercially working in this industry for 10 years. I started out in the pharmaceutical industry. I did that for 17 years prior to coming here, working for some of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. I'm an organic chemist by education and training. I've made drug products, natural products, so out of petroleum, right? So for a long time, and I say that as find something cool in ambient nature, in the rainforest, and then figure out how to make it with readily available materials. Like that's where I came from. For hop latent viroid, I feel like it seems really new to us. It's definitely getting some media push right now, but it's not new to our industry, and it's not new to the global community. It's been in the hop system for almost 30 years now, and they've been researching how it's spread, how to prevent it, how to test for it effectively, what parts of the plant you should test for it. They've even come to the point where they're saying, hey, how can we take a plant that's already been exposed and treat the plant so that it won't be able to harm other plants, right? So there's been a lot of work on this in the last 30 years in other industries. for our industry, I feel like it's becoming more well known because now that the hemp bill has passed 5 years ago, you're able to transport seeds and non-THC bearing cuttings really across state lines, which was a little bit more controlled in the past, right? And some people who maybe weren't interested in doing this the right way, and by that I mean like with appropriate controls on seeds, cleanliness, etc., started moving things around the country. So where you might not have had this virus in outdoor grown crops in New England, for instance, and you have it now because people brought crops from the West Coast to the East Coast recently. So there's definitely we are seeing it move around. I think the hard part for me is there are ways to monitor, control, and prevent. So things being industry wide, industry destruction seems very unreasonable. I have heard that a couple times. In the same way that you have problems with thrips and rust mites and spider mites and different molds, you can prevent and monitor for this using similar techniques for biohazard prevention for transmission. And not only that, but then there are methods for treating seeds. There are methods for treating tissues. People are used to doing, but it is.
So to summarize, HLV is a disease that affects cannabis plants as well as other hop family tree type plants. It can result in withering issues and diminish your yield from your crop by 30 to 50%. One of the most insidious things about HLV is that it can remain latent and dormant for a long time and not pop up. At least that's what I've read recently. And also in California, one recent survey done by a testing lab found that 90% of their samples contain the virus. So,
yeah. And I would say, in California, something like 60% of the flower is grown outdoors. And one of the main methods of transmission is, through animals, like through physically touching an infected plant and then touching another infected plant. As well as through pollen, right? So if you're outdoor and potentially having open pollination, having exposure to birds and those kinds of things, then you're going to have the opportunity to get these to have transmission, right? For sure, like I feel that when I first saw it in Colorado back in 2016, we weren't calling it HLV. But people were noticing that their plants would get sick and they'd have strange leaf structure, and plants that had always been vigorous were, and when I say vigorous, I mean like really well producing plants with big colas, plants that smelled great, right? Plants that were beautiful. And then the next generation of that plant just wouldn't be. And it definitely does have this idea of just kind of hanging out so that you don't know. From the standpoint of a plant may be infected, a mother plant may be infected. And you can't tell that the mother plant's infected, right? Because she's not flowering. She looks fine. And you keep taking plants off of her. And then you can't tell during vegetation, right? Maybe the plant is a little bit smaller, maybe. But you really don't see it until like that 4th or 5th week of flower, which is 10 weeks into the plant's life. And even then, they were saying that around 30% of all of the plants that test positive, you can't tell the difference between those plants and every other plant. Now, it's worth noting that means that those 30% of plants aren't having lower THC, lower terpene, and lower overall weight, right? Because the plant is the same. It would be similar to like a herpes virus, okay, guys, where your body is carrying the virus around like your whole life, okay? But you don't notice that it's there until you get shingles when you're like under some other, right? So, it's just those kinds of things, that happen. I feel like monitoring exists. I'm not 100% sure people are interested in paying the price for monitoring because it is kind of quite expensive, in my opinion. If you wanted to test, 10% of every room, you're going to pay several $1,000s to get testing done in that room. And is that something that our industry can do right now? I'm not sure. The answer is yes. Right. So, but there are other ways, right? So you can prevent by having biohazard controls, right? Like clean sanitation practices, those kinds of things. There have been some really great studies that show that starting from seeds, which is not the normal practice for our industry, reduces the amount of transition down to less than 10%, right? Then there's some treatments that you can do for seeds that do that as well. And there's been some good studies to show that there's a lack of transmission through tissue culture propagation as well, right? So these are all techniques that exist, whether or not they're commercially viable and whether or not people are interested in trying them out, and the variability that comes with seed production, and the cost of doing tissue culture. It isn't that the technology doesn't already exist, right? The technology is there. We don't have to invent a new car. We just have to decide if we want to buy it.
And we mentioned seeds a couple of times here, and this is important, that HLV can infect seeds, but as you mentioned, there's a treatment for it. So if you propagate via seed, you are 90% less likely to have that type of a problem. Only 10% of the normal resulting.
Yeah, and I would say if you're not depending on where you're getting your seeds, you might have a higher chance of having males than you would have having hop latent viroid.
Well,
but growing from seeds mean you're going to have lots of different phenotypes. It takes longer time for a seed to germinate versus the time for a clone to set roots and go into a vegetation state is longer. So there are some pretty significant commercial considerations if you're moving from a propagation via cloning versus either tissue culture or propagation from seeds methods. I mean, and there are consequences to making those changes. I mean, the pheno cultivar changes across seeds are, I pop between 100 and 200 seeds a year just for my own personal pheno hunting activities. It's not that many. We'd be talking about thousands of seeds. And it's also worth noting that the cost of a seed in our current marketplace can be $4 or $5 a seed. That's much more expensive than the price of clones, than making your own clones, for sure.
And just to reset the conversation, we're talking about hemp latent viroiditis with Cass Coleman, Mr. Hashbash, and the top of Jamie Lowell's head. So let's just... So please continue. What we're really talking about here is a real issue that can diminish yields, and seems, although we're talking about different methodologies to be able to restrict it, we're also talking about an industry that may not be willing to spend the money. And if that's the case, even if those methodologies of restricting viroid spread are available, will the industry still suffer anyway, just because people are so tight right now with pinching pennies?
100%. I mean, I think people are already feeling the burn from this. I felt the burn from this last year. It was unpleasant. I have friends in other states that really saw decimation in their crop production from this disease, and they were already struggling. You lose 30% of the weight in the room and, 2 or 3 points of THC, right? And your cannabis tastes like hay instead of like what you were intending to grow, right? People don't want to buy it. There are definitely commercial consequences to this disease. I think for me, what I'm struggling with is hearing people talk about the end of cannabis as a plant on the planet. I don't think that's. I think that might be taking it a little too far.
What is it? The plot
those
of a
are
DC
newbies.
villain movie or what? Because that would be a horrible thing. Go ahead, Adam.
Well, I was just going to say those are newbies, and finances in the industry don't seem to add up anyways. My question for Casson is, would the tissue culture give us the answer that we need? And how much, because I see tissue culture as the future, the viable future to keep strains the way we want them. If this is something that can be found in tissue culture, and we can eradicate it, that's great. Whether the industry is willing to spend the money to do that or not, I honestly, I never heard of this in the industry existed, which obviously it was there. It's always been there.
John
But-
Bronson asked if the virus harmful to consume, and that's a very valid question for all of our viewers. Cass, you don't think that if you consume cannabis with the HLV virus in it, that it poses any additional risks, do you?
I don't think humans can catch the hop latent virus. It's
Right.
a plant virus. It's not like a pig or bat virus that can transmit to humans. And again, this disease, while it may be new for the industry and certainly new for Michigan, it's been around for over 30 years. I think if there was a risk to transmission to people, we would know about it because it would be in basically all of our beer.
Right. Well, that was my next question was, how do the beer guys handle it? What
It adds a little extra flavor.
What does the hops
Little
industry do
microbrews.
about it? Do they just take the loss and have?
Yeah, so they treat their they pre-treat their plants at this point. They started pre-treating their plants about 8 years ago. So when they're seeds, they get treated, and they do testing and monitoring of their fields. I don't know how much you guys know, but hops is a perennial in many places, right? So if your field gets contaminated, right, then you're going to have a lower yield and potentially diminished flavor. So then they would cull the field, do a burn down, and then start again. And now they're treating their seeds, so they're getting even better than a 90% without viroid. Of course, that's the hit. This is the hops industry, right? So it's a little bit different than what we do and the way they handle it.
Right.
They also have really interesting environmental controls, which I think are we don't really use in our industry, right? Like they will buy all of the land for 25 miles and plant in a valley, right? So that no potential contaminants nearby, right? They do some really interesting controls, especially for some of the more important hops varieties. But I would say also, in that industry, climate change is really having a pretty intense impact to places where you used to be able to grow great hops. You can't grow them outdoors anymore. They've had to move. So there's a lot of big changes happening for that industry, beyond just this one disease. Again, they've been impacted for decades, right? So
you may have already alluded to this, and I know that there's a relationship between hops and cannabis. We expect what works for hops, even if there needs to be a slight variation or something. We expect what works for hops and what has worked already over the years can apply to cannabis, or already has.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah,
and
the
we
one
also
thing-
know that from all the research we've done.
Transmission, though, the transmission can sometimes be from casual contact also. So if it's not genetically included in the seed, if you're not careful, you mentioned the environmental controls that are used by the modern hops industry. If you start with the best of seed, if you're not controlling your access, you could still infect your crop.
Is this something?
Yeah,
that
and it's most of the
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
What'd you say, Adam?
I just wanted to know: is this something that you you could dust a crop with, that you could, you had a neighbor you didn't like growing his big hemp fields. You could, yeah, man. There's people that do worse, Rick.
I know.
There's
My
people that have
surprise
done
is
worse.
a little bit,
I know.
Yeah, I mean this is
when the hemp,
transmitted through pollen, through touching. So yeah, if you wanted to be a dick, you could take an infected plant and like smack it on the ground a few times so that it's kind of bleeding. You know how plants bleed, and then just walk through and whap it with all the other plants with it, and then some of those plants would get infected. And then because nobody is paying attention, because you're not doing monitoring and you're not controlling, because how the hell did that random guy get access to your plants anyway, right? So you definitely have no monitoring and controlling in place. Now your employees didn't know that those plants were infected. They're going to touch those plants, and because you don't have monitoring and controlling in place, they're going to touch other plants. Now those other plants are going to be infected, et cetera, right? So I mean, there are methods to minimize the transmission, but it means changing clothes. It means taking a shower. It means washing hands. It means changing gloves. It means using tools that have been sanitized, and not just, oh, I wiped it with, an alcohol swab. You did a bleach bath with it. Because alcohol does not kill the viroid, right? We know that at this point, right? So that means you actually have to be using a chlorine-based sanitizing solution, right? How many grows have you been to that are actually washing their tools and not just wiping them off with alcohol?
Okay, how many grows have you been to where they let you walk through in your street clothes?
I've been through quite a few grows. A couple of times
like,
I've been asked to put on PPE. Yeah. Yep.
I mean,
right?
Give it a squeeze.
How many times they're like, you should give this nug a squeeze and a spill.
Yeah. Yep. So that's a common issue here too. The other thing is testing labs. If you have a testing lab that sends out a guy, and they're required in Michigan to send out a guy or a gal to pick up samples from different places, different cultivation centers, those people are actually in where your bud storage is at too. I mean, they travel from place to place.
What about all the people that are growing their 12 that have a job at a dispensary?
You know what? That's
a good question. Right now, if they have males and they have pollen, that pollen can go anywhere, and that pollen is, I know I keep trying to think about it like this is the HIV for cannabis plants.
Yes.
Okay? Right. We want to keep the sperm as far away from the plants as possible.
So I will tell you that in the early days when we opened Big Daddy's, one of the very first dispensaries in the state of Michigan, first in Oakland County, 2009, we had some caregivers that did not want to come into our place if we had house plants or any other display live plants there, because their contention was other motherfuckers have been in there, and the pollen and the yuck stuff from their grows gets on the house plants, and then he walks in there and then takes it home himself. Now, whether or not that was a logical stretch or whether that's just a small percentage or maybe it's a real concern, we had to at one point take everything out because we had some people that just would not come in.
I think it's a major concern to the point that I've been given tours of up-and-coming facilities where this is this room, this is this room, this is our changing room, this is our shower room, this is our locker room. And, they get it. Some of these people actually understand that your employees are going to shower when they get there, and they're going to change from what they're wearing when they leave. I mean, and even that's still just the best we can, almost the best we can do.
Mm-hmm.
But
Indeed.
it's the future.
Well, and one of the things that I feel like people sometimes forget is for a long time we only grew indoors. We only grew indoors. We only grew in remote mountainous areas. We only grew in closets. Okay. we didn't grow on the highway where the plants could be seen, because if we did, they would fucking come take the plants and then arrest all of us, right?
And you kept your circle small.
And so now, right now we have, you know, I mean, I was literally just in Colorado driving by a huge outdoor grow that I could see from the highway.
Right.
Okay. Huge outdoor grow. I mean, acres and acres and acres and acres of outdoor grow. And that means that any pollen that was on my vehicle could have been, you know, those plants could have been exposed. And just so you guys know, I mean, I drove through Nevada, Arizona, Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, Maryland, West Virginia, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, and Pennsylvania in the last 3 weeks. So that's a lot of pollen from a lot of parts of the country, right? Like, it could go anywhere. So yeah, I mean, I feel like sometimes it's because, you know, we're doing things differently. I think that we have a lot of other production now as well, right? I mean, you know, I drove through West Virginia and Kentucky, and there were acres of hemp already planted. And this plant, they don't care if it has seeds. In some cases, they're intentionally growing for seed production, right? Which means they have pollen, and it's intentional pollen, and that pollen could be a transmission source, right? So, but really, I think I saw a comment come up. I think it was by Max, and Max was saying something about it really being touching transmission, contact transmission is the number one. So we have seen that it's damage to the plant. So think leafing the plant, cutting the plant, right? An animal eating part of the plant, right? Getting that in there, and then those wounds on the plant, or even insects, right? Thrips damage, spider mite damage, right? Creates these holes in the plant, and then the virus can transmit to everything from that, right? Or just you grabbing it and rubbing it with your fingers, right? And you're creating these, you know, micellular holes. And now you've got an avenue for transmission. You know, try telling a person not to touch their weed, though. I mean, sometimes I'm like, hey guys, why don't we just not manhandle the weed all the time? We could try that. Why don't we just start there? Why don't we start with clean hands, clean tools, clean clothes?
Seems like
don't touch the weed.
More automated systems are getting used more regularly.
Well,
that's one of the reasons.
Simply to cut down the amount of people touching the plant.
Right.
I mean, it has not, and that's something I was talking with Stacy about. It's not the lack of wanting to hire people or trying to keep your numbers of employees down. It's trying to keep the number of employees that actually touch the plant down. That's where we seem to have our biggest problem. It's not,
of course,
it's not a
the
union
living
thing.
plant, right?
The living plant,
and
right?
keeping people between two things separate, right? If you're touching a dead plant, you're not then going and touching living plants. I mean, some of it can just be order of operations, right? Like come to the facility, take a shower, change into your facility clothes, wash your hands again, right? And then you're going to go handle the moms. And it's it's the first thing you do because they're the most important part of your day. Like, and you want to keep them as healthy as possible, right? And then go change clothes and wash your hands again, and then go on to the rest of your work. You know, just convincing people to do that. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'll have an employee who refuses to take all of their clothes off. They want to wear their long sleeve shirt and their pajama pants under their uniform. And I'm like, if you want to work here, you got to fucking gown out, man, which means you take your clothes off, you take a shower, right? And you put on the uniform, right? And no, you're not wearing 3 has to be clean. And if it was outside, it's not clean, but they don't want to. So, and I still don't really understand why. I mean, when I was 14, I showed up there, they made me change into a uniform. I never once questioned if it was okay for me to not wear the uniform. In our industry, they're like, no way, I'm going to wear my hoodie underneath my jacket.
Well,
okay, man.
Most Most of these people working in this industry think they know more than you do, Casson. And they just don't. That's the problem. They all have a basis of knowledge that, and we talked, we met, someone mentioned it last night on Medical Mondays. You know, when I grew my first crop, it was the greatest thing I'd ever done until, 200 crops later, I realized what shit I had grown the first time. People think that because they can grow this plant and they can come off with, a half ounce on their first plant, that they hit the jackpot. And then 10 years later, 20 years later, they realize, oh, I didn't know shit. But
sometimes it takes actually having to experience the consequences for people to wake up as to why some of those things are in place. And we'll take a little a step here for a second, Cass and Adam, and bring in Bobby.
Hey guys,
Stoner
Hey.
himself.
hear me? Because I can't hear you guys.
We can hear you fine,
No.
boy, I wish it was the other way.
Hey man, you cannot hear us.
Adam.
Hey,
You can definitely not hear
I
us.
can't
I'm talking
hear
at
though.
you.
I don't know if you can hear me.
We can.
Just talk, Bobby.
My
hear
volume's
you.
turned
Can
all
hear
the
you.
way up. Oh, is that a yes? You can, yes?
Yes.
Oh, so I can hear you, but I mean, you can hear me, but I can't hear you. Okay, well, that can be interesting. Hey, hello everyone. Jamie, everybody, we had a really great, successful squash off this weekend. It was a metric and caregiver, both entered. Great time. We had a metric person took first, and two caregivers took second. Landrace Indian took second, and Kalamazoo Vines took third, and they're both caregivers. And of course, Glacier, right? Cannabis, they took first. And they're a metric place. So hats off to them and everything. And this was our 45th, I believe, 45th squash off. We've done so many of them now all around the world. It's crazy, in the States and international, Amsterdam, Spain. Our next international one for sure is Ecuador in August. So you can't ask me any questions, so I'm sorry about that. It's always a great time coming on your show and hearing it when I can hear it. So thank you. Check out USA Squash Off on IG. All the live videos are there, or on my page, Uncle Stoner on IG. All right, I'll see you later.
Bobby
Wow,
looks
how unfortunate that we couldn't hear. that
Bobby looks
couldn't hear
older
us.
than I do, doesn't he? A little bit with that long beard makes him look a little older than me.
45 squash off, so that's
What I was
that's a
shooting
fantastic
for.
shot.
Yeah, I've done a few of them all over the world. I did some in Amsterdam with them, and
I know he's been to Mexico.
it's a hell of an event. I encourage you.
Jamaica.
The problem is it's a 7-hour event. It takes, literally 7 hours. It's after you end up dabbing 19 different strains, it's hard to walk back to your car. I'll tell you that. Yeah. I had to actually skip a meeting that I was promised a meeting with one of the celebrities, and I wanted to talk and work something out, and I actually had to skip that meeting because I was just really, 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 really high and didn't want to sound stupid. But it's interesting that you learn a lot. It's an educational event. People stand around and watch, and it's really fascinating. They put everything under a microscope so you can see it on a big screen TV. You can see the trichomes in different formation. interesting competition.
And again, we're referring to Uncle Stoner's squash off, which took place at Spark in the Park in Ypsilanti, Michigan, just this past weekend.
Yeah, I saw Deb doing a lot of the work, a lot of the organizational stuff when I came up.
Deb does the work,
judges.
Bobby does the talking.
Yeah, that's what it looked like. Yep.
Well, that way shit gets done, though, right?
Well, Bobby can talk for 7 hours. I've known Bobby a long time. He's a great guy, and him and Deb put together a hell of an event.
Yeah.
Shelly, you could join us if you'd like, Shelly. And Amy and Darren McCarty, Adam, and was it Michael Toohey maybe? A lot of people recognizable were
the
hanging out around. Yeah.
Captain Kirk.
Yeah. He was hanging out around there. And so it was cool,
Jonah from Cab Stars was a judge. And
there we go. Bobby's weighing in. Make sure we know that we make the right information.
Yeah.
And I know I'm familiar with some of the Glacier flour. I've had it before and liked what I've tried. So good for those guys.
It's always interesting to me, and Adam's done this before too, where we have caregivers, which are part of Michigan's medical marijuana program, which are really an unregulated cultivation scenario where you can grow up to 72 plants for 5 registered patients, including yourself, or versus sort of the regulated market with large commercial grows. Many times indoor cultivation centers with millions of dollars worth of equipment and a big staff too. So it always fascinates me. And the thing is, when people don't know how to grow really good cannabis, they grow really good cannabis. And it doesn't matter whether they're doing it in their basement or in a gigantic 100,000 square foot Harvest Park kind of a scenario. When somebody gets it right, they get it right. So good.
Joe Treeslinger was from Homegrown Genetics, was a judge, I'm assuming, too.
Yeah, he sat just to my right. I'm trying to think who was sitting next to him. I'm having a hard time.
Yeah.
A lot of great people, in other words.
Yeah, so it was fun, and it wasn't too crowded. And, for Matt and company, I wish they would add some more people. I know how that feels, but it was a really nice, fun time for me.
They put on an excellent event for their first time, and not too crowded saved their ass. Had they had a couple thousand people show up, they might have had some problems. Simple problems, but problems.
Mm-hmm. Well, there were a lot of national music acts at Spark in the Park too. Be Real was there. I talked about launched his new line. Trick I saw performed on Sunday with his full band.
It rained a little bit. I was around Ann Arbor, but I didn't stop back by.
Trick is a good show, though. I mean, he's huge, large human being, but he puts on a great show.
With his band, there's nothing. I told him straight to his face, I would only hire you with your band. The energy, any rapper can show up with a USB plug with his tunes on it. But what energy does he get off of that?
No, the live band.
Trick in front of his live band.
He's been traditionally behind some good cannabis too. So part of the industry, as well as showing up as entertainment. Max
questions: how many people actually know what good cannabis is? There can't be one universal standard for good cannabis. Everybody's endocannabinoid system is unique. So when someone says, you don't know what good cannabis is, in my mind, I'm thinking you're not really respecting the fact that we're two individual people and that you're probably just trying to insert some
Well, there's different standards,
but there is,
and depending on how you want to, we could ask further. Let's describe it and see if we're on the same page.
Yeah, but we
I
know
mean-
that some of the statistic numbers like THC percentage that are typically used to gauge potency in the industry are just false flags. Go ahead, Adam.
No, I was going to say I didn't smoke much of it because I was at the tail end, but the brickweed that used to come in from Mexico that was 6, 7, 8, 12%, but had terpenes up the ass, that got everybody high. Nobody said this
Sun
shit
grown
was
close to the
horrible.
equator. Oh yeah.
But
Mm.
as soon as I got the opportunity to buy Super Silver Haze buds the size of your forearm, I mean literally, and it tasted good. It tasted better.
You're saying that is better than the brickweed
Oh,
by a lot of standards.
by a lot of standards. Same
Right.
thing. We had. I was there during the era of BC bud. Why was it BC bud? Because the British Columbians in Canada had figured out what the Mexicans were doing, and they said, you know what, we can do this up here and just ship it back to the States. They started doing it. It was green. It was sparkly. It was better than the brown, moldy stuff that came from the South. But it was nothing like the quality of some of the stuff these guys are growing today.
Hey, Bobby,
I mean,
go ahead, Adam. I'm sorry.
well, I was just going to say, when someone spends 8 to 12 hours a day in their grow room, they're going to turn out a much better product than somebody who doesn't. In my opinion.
Unless they're spreading the virus around.
Well,
Squeezing the buds.
it's always about not spreading the virus, my friend.
And Bobby says that's why they go through so many steps of the competition. They put it under the microscope, and the judge get their hands on it, smell in it, and then squashing it and rejudging it for new terp profile and taste and effect. So before and after the squash, the judges get to experience it and check it out and smell it and evaluate
For
it.
those that aren't familiar, squash off, literally you take a bud of cannabis, you put it on a plate, and then you use a hydraulic ram to squash it down with a huge number of feet.
Heat and pressure.
Yeah, it's terrible pressure. And then it squishes all the good stuff out, and then you test the good stuff.
And then they get fucked up on it.
Mm-hmm. So
everybody has a grand old time.
Grand old time.
So I appreciate that, Bobby. We'll have you back on when we have proper, stuff, sound, and whatever's going on, and get a little more glimpse into what's going on with you and Deb and so forth.
Ecuador. That sounds extremely exciting.
Yeah.
Also, malaria, I guess.
Yeah. You're going to be getting a shot before you head out on that one, John.
So like Max is talking about standards such as not having heavy metals or, just like no way to gauge if there's any like shit on there of some kind.
There sure are some standards that we all share. We all want flavorful things. We all want the bud that burns the clean ash and we want something properly flushed so we know we're not inhaling any chemicals.
Teacher, I have a question. What is the harm by these things you're telling us we should be avoiding? And that's one of my biggest questions is, does it matter? And if it does matter, then it matters. I'm not saying it shouldn't. But
Cass will tell you that when there's bad stuff on cannabis and sick people get a hold of it, then it doesn't actually go very well, right?
Some bad stuff.
Yeah. It's not ideal.
Indeed. I mean, there are some things, I know there's a lot of conversation about the residual salts and whatnot that get left in when people aren't treating their plants correctly, right? And, I can remember when people were like, oh, look, I can spray my plant with neem oil. And then, I'm going to spray it like a week before harvest. And now I'm smoking neem oil, okay? So there are best practices and there are standards. And there are things that, having them be present, we know that you don't want to smoke those things. Right. You probably also don't want to eat those things. Right. So keeping those things off, for sure. Are there some standards of quality that have nothing to do with personal safety? 100%. Right. And those standards are, I think, the differences that Max is talking about. I'm not 100% certain, but I feel like it's those inherent to the plant properties that good growing practices, really able to bring out everything the plant has to offer versus literally just growing, little golf balls that happen to be cannabis that maybe have
Right.
trichomes on them.
Right.
I mean,
Get it
I
to
can remember
express
the
itself.
Some
first
trichomes on them.
grower I saw, the first commercial grower I saw in Colorado. Right? They were growing plants as though they were tomatoes, and as long as they were big and leafy, they were like, these plants are the best plants ever. Certainly those plants, I don't think anyone would buy them in Michigan, right? Because they were, they were very low potency. And when I say very low potency, I mean probably between 8 and 10% THC. And no other cannabinoids present, right? So total cannabinoids of less, like 10% or less. And usually tasted and smelled a bit like hay, like alfalfa, right? But that's because, they were growing them as though they were tomatoes. They were using tomato recipes, right?
That sounds like something that would make some people who are
Like
sensitive
Miracle
a
Grow
little
for the
more
win.
anxious. Yeah.
Well, I always say that the plant will grow.
Yeah,
to its
potentially. And,
limit.
for some people, my wife needs more THC than a 10% plant's going to offer.
Right. You
Right?
figure out what you need for the person.
I mean, how much weed would she have to smoke if it was an 8% plant? A lot of weed. And would that be healthy? Would having to smoke, an ounce or
Right.
two, every 8 hours be okay for your body? I don't
Right.
know the answer to that because I've
Well,
never
so far for
tried.
me,
But I have
you
a
know,
feeling that I might like it. I may have some adverse effects of
You know what? While I'm thinking about it, Cass, I want to just point something out here. We've interacted here with Max Lorenz, and he had the question about the standard of proper flushing, that type of thing. And when you came to Michigan, you learned about some of the issues we had with the people running Veritas Labs and their former situation at the MSP Forensic Labs and skewing science in order to affect cases and things like that. Well, Max had one of those cases early on, and it was through his case that a lot of that stuff was uncovered. And so I just wanted to let you know that because I know
I
you're
didn't
familiar
even.
with some of that story. Yeah, he
Well,
lost his son
I
for
guess
2
I knew
years.
that one time.
His kids were taken.
Yeah, he lost
I
his
mean-
son for a long time, and they almost didn't want to give him back. Michael Kamorn did a good job of those guys on the stand, but the fact they even take it that far is ridiculous.
Over bad science.
Yeah.
It's
So
it's
he had
so
a
messed
he had
up.
a
And
he had something I think the size of your
crazy part
thumbnail and
is
some
they're
wax
still
paper, and they made a big
doing
deal.
it
I'm
today.
sorry,
They're still
I'm sorry, Cass. I was talking over you. I didn't catch what you said. If you could repeat that. There's a lag, I think.
Hmm.
Oh no, I think maybe the thing that hurts my heart the most is it's still happening today, right? And not just maybe not as often as Michigan, but around the country it's still happening. People are losing their kids over poor testing practices. It's not okay.
No.
So in this case, I'll just bring it up again. He had a little tiny bit of wax. They had to call an ambulance because his wife was having a episode. Police
From the
came.
stress of the police encounter, right?
Yeah, the police came with them, and they found a little tiny bit of wax on a piece of parchment paper or whatever, and the lab essentially what the scam was. We don't know if this came from the biological plant or if it was synthetic. Meanwhile, it's got like terpenes and other properties of the plant in it. I mean, in order to reproduce it synthetically would be very bizarre and probably anyway. That was the approach then, because only for a while, because of a court case, only leaf and flour were considered to be able to be usable. And if there was a concentrate or something, some people were still getting charged felonies for that stuff.
The Carruthers case, which is another Camoran success story. So,
Yeah, that's true enough.
Semi success story. We actually had to go to the legislature and get them to fix that because the Court of Appeals made a bad ruling and the Supreme Court refused to hear it. So.
Yeah. But anyway, so just to tie in a little bit more historical perspective, Cass, because I know you know some of that story, and it's good to see Max here, and he does have his son back, and and that type of thing is out in California. So
It's another one of those stories that underscores the horrors of the drug war. Now, that's not a case that'll ever appear on some kind of federal stat sheet. There won't be any tally made of the Lorenz case in one way or another. But talk about being significant in the state and significant for that family. Just
Well, and that was a CPS issue. That's not even law enforcement or court jurisdiction. That's a group from an organization that thinks they know better and decide to take your children from you. And
Max, that's good to hear that your son is as large as you are now. That's great. Oh, 14. Oh, man. Boy, do you have some trouble ahead of you, boy.
No, they didn't want to give him back because they said, "Well, it's been so long now, so we separated us, might as well just move on." Or I mean, it sounded so strange hearing that was actually a thing. And then on the stand, Cameron made them admit that it was because of the shit that they did that created the situation that they're saying is the reason why they, Anyway, it was fucked up. But
the system struggles so hard to not change. They really want to still criminalize things, and when we do things like pass laws written by the people, they really don't want to obey. They don't.
I thought maybe Brandy might make it on too, but one of the things we want to talk about, Cass, was Trip, you, Stacy, Brandy, others met up with people in DC, National Cannabis Industry Association, Americans for Safe Access, met up with some of the lawmakers there and did some national type lobbying and information giving and stuff like that. And just want to kind of get your thoughts on what went down and what the major subjects, issues, etc. who you talked to.
Ooh, storm coming.
We're gonna watch Adam get hit with some lightning in it.
No, you're not.
Nice summer storms here in Michigan. That sounds nice.
I'm here. I'll be back.
So I mean, we were in Washington for the lobbying was pretty intense. The questions being asked by the freshman legislators, basic. It was good. Like, we needed to be there. People need to be there. They need to hear from us all the time. And even some of the super amazing, supportive people out there, like Senator Stabenow, still needed to hear from us, right? Because they didn't have the full put to get in there and have those questions asked and answered. I think the broader picture is, there's whether the change is just how the hemp industry is handled with the change to the farm bill that's going to come out, in September, any other potential changes that could be happening. There's a big push now for rescheduling. Don't know what, scheduling. I'm a proponent of descheduling, so that always concerns me. Still pushing for things like safe banking, still pushing for patients' rights, being able to use cannabis and not lose your job and not lose your kids, right? Those things are still important. Removing employer testing for cannabis, right? Like, there are a lot of other like little things, but that have a big impact on all of us consumers and producers that I feel like people are maybe leaning towards being able to get on board with. But for me, the surprising part was, we had a lot of freshman legislators and just how uninformed they were on even the most basic things. And I mean, really just completely uninformed. So, people who were still thinking that, cannabis was as dangerous as heroin, right? Which I'm still shocked. I remember when I learned that in Dare when I was a little kid. Okay, I recall, right? They were plants next to each other and they were the same. But come on, man. Opioids are killing how many people? Like tens of thousands of people a year. It's not the same with this plant, right? So So there was some concern around that. There's still a lot of conversation.
Water
about,
kills more people a year.
Criminal activity and really, right, like drownings. Okay, randomly getting hit by a car. Okay, more often
people
than you
people
die
drink
from
too much.
cannabis consumption.
Invariably, people drink too much water, and get like toxins get flushed out and kill them.
Too much water. And then
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, and I forgot there's a lag, so I'll try to let you finish so we don't have to get too confused. I'm sorry.
no, that's good. I feel like, more broadly, getting some more education into them, and then also acknowledging that with the change in control of the House, right, we may see for the first time safe banking pass the Senate, and then it may not pass the House this year after passing 7 years in a row. Right,
7 years in the House,
there
In the
are
House and not being able to pass the
constantly
Senate. Exactly. Sorry.
right?
Again, talked over.
It's the exact
not being able to pass the
juxtaposition.
Senate. Now it'll pass in the Senate for the first time, but not be able to pass in the House. And they have to pass both houses of chambers of commerce, right? So it's like very interesting. I think it was good. It was nice to meet more people from Americans for Safe Access. They were proposing some really new things that I had never really considered before, creating a new schedule for cannabis.
I was going to bring that
Schedule
up, so thank you.
6 beyond the current Controlled Substances Act. I never had considered it. I'm still wrapping my head around it. There were senators on both sides of the party line that were interested in this, right? And when I say interested in this, we were actually like willing to co-sponsor this legislation. I haven't seen the legislation come to the floor yet, but at least they were interested, right? Especially some of the freshman senators who seem more interested in our industry as a whole, especially through the lens of patient access, which was really nice. The second half of my time there, I was with the National Cannabis Industry Association. I've been lobbying with them in DC for about 8 years now. These conversations are super crucial. And I feel like everyone should be having these conversations, right? It shouldn't just be like the Cassins of the world talking to their legislature about, how the plant impacts them, their business, and their future. Like, we're all impacted by this. If you're in the industry or you're a consumer, you're impacted by it. Do you want access or not? Right? They're talking right now about changing the schedule, rescheduling cannabis down to Schedule 3, which means you'll only be able to buy it at your local pharmacy. And you still won't be legally allowed to grow it in your own home. Right? So are you cool with that? Do you want to buy your weed from Walgreens? Nothing wrong with Walgreens, but is that what you want to do? I mean, some people don't even want to buy it from dispensaries, right? Like, they want to get it from their neighbor or their cousin, or they want to grow it at home, right? So there's a lot of other things that come with rescheduling. I feel like people need to say, and not all of us.
We don't like the 6 thing too. We talked about this, I think, a little bit last week or the week before, and although it might be there might be some practicality to it depending on some of the details, and I mean, it was talked about a little bit in Michigan over the course of some years. We've tried to do some work on getting it off of our state's controlled substances list as well, and don't like the idea of it. Like the idea of just taking it out and not treating it as something it's not, and not making these extra concessions along the way. I know, but incremental stuff politically is something you have to look at, and just how it works, and there might be some practicality to it, but
I just can't get there.
Hard time connecting to it. Go ahead.
I just can't get there though. Why would you embrace an additional set of fetters when you recognize that the current set of fetters are completely illogically applied? So the descheduling is the only thing that really makes sense. Then we also have two other substances, alcohol and tobacco, neither of which are on the schedule. So this is not an unprecedented.
And in Michigan, specifically excluded. There's a section saying this does not apply to these things.
But it doesn't really qualify under Section 3. Even if you created a brand new Section 6, why? If you're so close to descheduling that you have to create a whole brand new schedule just to still maintain it on the schedule, but it's really almost just scheduled, but then it seems more like descheduling straight out would be the right solution.
They describe it as it pertains to medical use, not necessarily things that apply to, adult use.
That's Americans for Safe Access's thrust is the medical aspect of cannabis use.
Jen says it needs to be descheduled. I think that's what we agree with. What we agree. Cass started off saying that's what they advocate for. So
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think we all here agree. I think more people, more consumers, more constituents saying what they want, being honest about it is important. You know, I mean, I was in a room. I was at lobby days. Okay, it was 10 days of lobbying on cannabis on Capitol Hill. The first 4 days there were less than 20 people. Right. The second 6 days there were about 100 of us from and everyone was invited. Right. Like, there are millions of cannabis consumers and thousands of cannabis companies, and there were hundreds, like less than 100 people. Like, come on, guys, like, we got to show up for this. If you don't show up for it, they don't think you care. Like, you need to make them care. We are so far down on the totem pole. Okay, right? They're worried about like jobs, inflation, random war around the world in the military-industrial complex. Right? They're worried about, the IRS, who's being indicted, right? Those are things they're worried about. They're not even thinking about us unless you call them and remind them that we exist.
Right.
It's just how it is.
always a good message, and we're in need of more people probably hitting our federal decision makers more often too. And a lot of us have spent a lot of time working in the state when there's still work to do here, but having a sensible parallel of a federal approach of some kind. And there's many different ways that could go down, and how some could win, some could lose, depending on how that shakes out, what happens with the state's programs, many considerations.
Last time I was on the ASO website, safeaccessnow.org, they had an automatic letter generator, which would help you to write to your elected officials, sending one message to multiple people, your senator, your House rep, and then perhaps the majority and minority leaders in both House and Senate. And that makes it so easy. So when we talk about sending a message, you don't always have to go to Washington in order to do that. You can let them know what's on your mind, especially when you're referencing a bill that's actually before them, something that would be in their committee or being considered by the House or the Senate itself.
The DPA, the Drug Policy, is it Alliance?
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes has good information, or those types of
Just
automated, messages to lawmakers and stuff
going
too.
to your
So does
local
National
town
Normal.
hall when they come and reminding them that
Elected officials have coffee hours. They do public appearances. They take question and answers on things like call-in shows, or there are many different ways you can reach out to your public official, but face-to-face is really the best. As long as you have, an idea what you want to say, and that you're able to say it in an intelligent way,
Concise.
adding a whole lot of personal story and additional stuff that a very, very busy person just doesn't have time to sit for.
Well, last session we faced a few challenges and had to make a lot of meetings with various organizations, speak with lawmakers, and try to get some better information in. Cass was involved with a lot of that. And staved off some restrictive, stupid stuff on a state level. But I think that I'm gonna not necessarily commit to a federal approach, but I noticed I've been more aware of what's going on a little bit, and would like to have been involved in this last trip, but still think in the future that being involved in something meaningful and trying to affect federal change is something I'm going to start incorporating a little bit into future efforts. it can go many different ways.
The opportunities for activism are just endless. There's just so many different ways you can get involved and participate. Attending something like Spark in the Park may seem like, you're just buying a ticket to a party, but in actuality, you're helping to spread the word that cannabis is normalized and it's here to stay. And by the way, we're a huge $1 billion, almost $3 billion industry here in the state of Michigan, and that dwarfs almost all the other industries, here. So it won't be long that we can remain invisible to most of these other groups. But business persons and government employees, they recognize numbers more than anything else. And our industry certainly has numbers behind it. Here's the most important thing, though, is that I think it's the Edwards Institute that just published, I think that between 25 and 30% of all cannabis consumed is in the regulated market, and the other 70% is still in the unregulated market. So it behooves.
Which means there's room for both.
Yep, exactly right. And that the numbers will fluctuate over time based on how well the regulated market does, and that's how it's supposed to be.
Right. And these guys, none of them ever wrote a business plan that showed the black market disappear.
So, but it's the largest single source of new recruits for the regulated marketplace. First of all, you've got a whole group of people who are already used to using cannabis, and they're also used to budgeting their purchasing for cannabis too. So they've got a set dollar amount they want to spend, and they know what they want to get. And if they can't hook up with their friend, they can come to a dispo. I mean, A lot of people use both systems in order to be able to supply themselves.
I don't know what Kim is. I just put this up, and I don't know what we were talking about that directly.
Oh, I missed it.
Connects to.
Put it up again, would you please, Jamie?
Yeah.
How about crops of farmers, grains, fruits, and veggies, Tabasco, potatoes, hops, commodities?
Informally, Kim put up MATF. Is that like a multi-jurisdictional task force or something like that? We're talking about enforcement. I'm not sure. I don't know context, I guess, for these things. But there you go.
But the commodities market is valid. I mean, eventually, once we see some of these federal restrictions come off, cannabis will be traded publicly.
Okay. As a concept for how we should be treating it, okay. I'm sorry. That makes a lot of sense. So,
yeah.
Ultimately, but we've seen the slow progression in treating cannabis as it actually is as we open things up.
And some people believe that won't necessarily be a good thing either. When we start to commoditize the cannabis plant, when it becomes part of the mercantile exchange and hemp futures or cannabis futures are traded on some of the large markets, that allows manipulation of a different kind on the market itself.
We have these individual state systems and a lot of investment, and there's a federal change at some point, and then how interstate and international trade takes place and how that affects what's been going on there. There's a lot of considerations. There's going to be some.
Yeah, they sure painted themselves into a corner.
Sure. Something I don't consider often the consequences of descheduling, of federal legalization, right? I mean, Canada has been federally legalized for a bit now. Their total production is huge. They can't sell all of it. Companies are dying up there. And now they want to import to the U.S. illegally because, no international trade yet, right? Like some pretty intense things have happened in some countries where legalization has occurred. And certainly those small operators who are struggling in a small pond, they are not probably prepared to swim in the ocean, right? Because we won't just be competing with California and Oklahoma, right? And Arizona, where they have more sunlight and cheaper growing practices, right? We'll also be competing with Thailand, right? Where they already are allowing foreign
Huge.
people to come and
Huge.
grow the cannabis plant there for them, right?
Talk to those people
We'll
in
be
Vegas that
competing
would
with
do it.
all of
Yep.
South America, all of it,
My-
right? Massive. It's
We brought up
and
Colombia at the
you know,
beginning of the show.
probably good, right? Globalization, better access, you know, more access to plants more often, right? As long as the provision allows you to grow at home, right, and embraces the idea of low regulation so we can have craft cannabis, right, then we can still have small operators. But, you know, in the same way that we have craft beer, right? But sometimes I think people forget that. And I think also that they forget, you know, how profitable it was during prohibition of alcohol to be an alcohol transporter and producer.
Yep.
And then once that prohibition went away and everything was controlled by the state, you know, a majority of those companies went away. And now we only have like the big, 20?
Yeah.
Oh, the majority is fulfilled by the big 20. Doesn't mean, you know, there aren't lots of smaller distilleries and whatnot out there. But, you know, is it the 30% month over month, year over year, you know, growth that the industry is seeing on the state by state level? The answer is no.
I will say this.
And you
there's
know,
always gonna
must
be-
have in a free market is not the truth.
You know, local
Just because we want them and because we think that they would, you know, do a good job and because we want everybody to have a fair shake. The answer, Dad, that's not the case. Other people have more capital. Like that's just reality, right? You can't be a small steel producer in the same way you won't be able to be a small cannabis producer. Well, and you know, also buy your yacht and whatnot, right? Like,
I mean,
you
I
know,
think
not
they'll
you know,
always
maybe pay your bills, maybe if you're good at budgeting.
Right.
there's always a market for locally produced things, and people want to make a purchase that helps the local economy, things like that. But to be commercially viable, especially with the amount of product that's available to be put out by some of these tropical places, it's pretty amazing. Now, the one thing, of course, individual states right now,
Yeah, all
medical and
1,200
adult use
growers here in
will have
Michigan. Is that
deficiency
how
there.
local we're talking about? Just saying,
No,
there's
I
a
think
lot of
that
growers.
even
They're not all going to be
even
here
more
after
local,
federal legalization.
yeah, even more local than that. I mean, the guy that produces the Pinconning Paralyzer could very well do pretty good in that particular market, just like Pinconning beer sometimes does. You know, Leelanau beer is pretty local to where it's at, but yet pretty successful. It does seem like the market, of course, is going to go to a much cheaper position too. The advantage of growing bulk in Thailand is that when you bring it to the United States, you can sell it less for than what you could grow in Saginaw County.
Yeah, but that stuff will be amazing. It'll taste amazing. It'll get you high as hell. My buddies from the greenhouse and Strain Hunters just opened up a big thing in Thailand this past weekend. I got to see some pictures. But yeah, might be time to go to Thailand.
The point, though, is that globalization or even nationalization means that cultivation is going to be moved from disfavorable locations to more favorable locations, whether that's south, whatever. Richard earlier talked about 3 crops per season of wheat in one state. That's a huge advantage over other states where you're lucky to get 1 or something, get 2. So that's absolutely going to happen, and it's going to impact the entire cultivation industry too. Vertically integrated companies which are both retailers, processors, and cultivators too, they might be hurt the most because the investment that they have in the cultivation facilities represents, in most cases, to my experience, a much more significant portion of their entire debt load. And if that cultivation facility no longer becomes profitable, then you've got a big part of your debt load that's not contributing anymore. And that's the focus fund receivership. LS Skymen.
Mhm.
You know,
Any update on Skyman? We talked about it last week a little bit, but not that I was necessarily paying that much attention, but I didn't hear anything during the course of this week.
I've not heard anything new on the Skymen situation. It seems as if they're still awaiting offers. Typically, when they make an opening for bids, it's done for a certain time period. For example, 30 days, whatever, 60 days. And they already have one bid that was reported on, which is from Skymen's primary debtor, or primary creditor, rather, that Skymen owes $130 million to, and they bid $109 million. So the problem is that in order for someone else to come in and make a bid, they would have to not only match the 109, but also agree to pay off the 130 that comes as a debt with the company itself. So that's a tough situation to see someone coming in to do, although that is a chain of 26 dispensaries and several cultivation facilities. So if someone big who's not already in the state of Michigan wanted to come in and with a definitive, they could really get it.
Yeah.
But I don't think it'll do it.
No.
I expect 26 vacant retail locations as they search for individual purchasers in different cities. Jamie, you know a lot about this, purchasing dispensaries in cities when perhaps the original opener has failed to do very well. With Mad's Cafe, you guys are expanding in this way, taking over some existing dispos in different cities.
Yeah, there's some opportunities to get into some markets by way of other people needing to back out or deciding not to continue on with their project and making it kind of affordable to get in there on top of it. And while things are slim, to be able to operate with a smaller debt load makes it possible to get along. So
it's basically the second.
Some opportunities are being created for some, while it's the scenario's a drag for many others.
All right.
So if 26 retail locations suddenly became on the market, there's enough interest out there from the different organizations, cannabis organizations, like Med's Cafe, maybe like Bloom or someone else, that those 26 would get all sucked up, wouldn't they?
I'm hearing it now.
I am. I just got rained on for a little while too. Now the sun's back out.
Oh, I'm getting ready now.
I don't think
Yeah, but
so.
like I'm saying, Jamie,
I would like to
It's yours at
but
Pine
when
Knot tonight.
we look at locations. Let's be honest. Like the places you just mentioned, they're like across the street from locations, are literally within 5-minute driving distance in the city of Lansing. You don't need all three of those.
Right.
It's interesting. Really, I think it's okay for us to just, as an industry, acknowledge that some companies will fail, even same level of value. Because if they did, let's be real, they would be making money instead of hemorrhaging. They're a vertically integrated company. If they had value, right? They're positioned for the kind of value they needed, and they still didn't manage to do okay, right? Like that's not the idea of the license being worth so much more money than you would actually pay for it, when you can literally get licenses, right? Those licenses go away. Other licenses come immediately on in those municipalities, maybe, but there's lots of places where there's still licenses open and people haven't filled them. Take Detroit, perfect example. First, maybe they just go away, right? Nobody needs to buy them. The customers will go somewhere else. They're already going somewhere else.
Yeah. Cass, I see that you got to leave pretty soon. Is there anything else you'd like to leave us with? Any final messages?
Any contact stuff for you if people are looking for some consultation or help with?
Yeah, I think you guys know that there's a hearing with the CRA really soon. If you're a consumer or a producer in the state of Michigan, change, and you haven't planned to comment on how they will impact you and your business, you're missing the boat. So make sure you're getting ready for that. I'm pretty sure it's tomorrow.
Yeah. I think so.
Might be the next.
So that was a little bit more slow than typical. We've been able to. It's been a lag. We've been able to hear gas pretty consistently, but I think people did hear that there's a CRA public hearing coming up soon, and that's a good time to weigh in on some stuff, which is part of the message that Cass has had throughout today's broadcast about being involved in federal and state. Oh, there goes Cass. Level. Yeah, there was some big thunder here a minute ago that set off somebody's car alarm and stuff like that. So,
yeah. I got just a little bit of rain up here. No thunder yet, but you guys are luckier than I am down there. Adam and Jamie are not that physically far apart by miles, so I'm sure they're both experiencing it about the same.
I hope Clarkson is okay though, because there's the Cure is there tonight.
Oh,
and
well, they will delay if there's lightning.
Yep. I heard I'd do another broadcast 420 post, and we were told that who is it? Loom lost the or stopped doing the contract with advertising at Auburn Hills. Is that correct?
Adam said that the other day too.
I was told their sign has been taken down.
Yep.
And I would just expect that it didn't offer them anything near what they were hoping to get out of it, because nothing moved, nothing happened.
Adam, I think what the original plan was for them to create some kind of a distribution or smoking area within Pine Knob. Isn't that correct?
And that wasn't the only
treehouse or something like that.
Right. That wasn't the only deal either. They made a deal with 313 Presents, who controls all the music venues. So I was expecting them to have, a cannabis area at everything that they got their fingers in. And they couldn't get to that point in any of them, especially Clarkston. They weren't. I mean, all they had to do it's like the beer area at the carnival. You fence it off, and people can smoke there.
Well, we know the physical way to do that, though, but the society in Oakland County, specifically in Clarkston and the surrounding areas, they have to have the will. And just because Pine Knob wants to make some money from this match with Loom, that doesn't necessarily sway the council's decision anyway, one or the other.
Well, the sheriff ain't gonna allow it. I watched cops allow. I watched Ypsilanti cops allow all kinds of shit that wasn't allowed.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's Ypsilanti and they don't give a shit about stuff like that. They're more concerned about,
you know why though? Because they weren't the ones traditionally being able to participate in the civil asset forfeiture and stuff. It was the local state police and the multi-jurisdictional task forces that were able to do those types of things. Had they been motivated by that, they might have cared more about stuff. I don't know.
Yeah. But
my man's up near Clio, and he says he heard thunder. Clio's about 10 miles north of me. I missed it, unfortunately. But, here in Michigan, we've got lots of things to talk about. The Viridis case, too. I mean, it's not come to another set of trial dates yet, but the Viridis issue is very ripe. They're still able to operate, is to the best of my knowledge, in the same manner that they have in the past, and produce relatively inflated THC numbers, supposedly, in order to maximize the marketing value of those people that choose to test with their company, which is why they have a self-reported 60%, 70% market share in the state of Michigan.
I just can't believe anybody would do business with them. The customer doesn't know. The consumer has no clue about this.
The THC number is a big deal in this marketplace, as much as I don't think it should be, or many don't think it should be. It is, and they offer a lot of deals to people for low cost or free for a while if you decide to work with them on some basis. And they hit it hard, and there's some appeals there. So we'll see what shakes out. They are in a process. They've got a blue chip law firm that is challenging a lot of different things throughout this entire stuff, and that's helping to stretch out the time frame here. I think normally these things would have been over with for a while, but this is a different scenario. Obviously, it was huge. I mean,
when a company sues the state regulatory agency, that is a pretty big thing. And I'm a brand ambassador, and I make public appearances on behalf of Redemption Cannabis, and I watched a gentleman make about a $300 purchase, and his only criteria on everything he wanted was the highest THC. That was it. Everything he bought, Medible, vape pack, cart, flower, the highest THC.
It's an easy thing to gauge, If you want to feel like you're optimizing some value somehow, I guess that's a way of looking at it.
It's so strange because, we can all go back to the time before 2008 when we didn't know anything about THC numbers, and we knew what THC was, but we didn't have any really way to gauge it other than our senses.
Well, not to interrupt you, but the government used to make this claim that the weed that the kids were smoking today was not like the weed that their parents were smoking when it was 12 and 13%.
But the DEA perpetuated that concept.
Right. But they never told us what numbers they were finding, Mm-hmm. They'd make these ridiculous claims.
They're breeding it to make it stronger and stronger.
Right. Yeah. Not this stuff testing in at 20.
And when it's on the same list as things like, heroin or whatever, the images.
But harsh. I celebrate some of these higher THC potency things when they're accurately reported. Well, yeah. I really do. And concentrates, things like that as well. What you're doing is you're giving more choices to the consumer, just as if when someone walks into a liquor store, look at the number of choices they have available to them. It's unbelievable. Well, and each one of them has their own alcohol value, but really it's more about what your palate wants. Are you a brandy drinker? Are you a beer guy? Are you a box wine kind of a person? Everybody has their own tastes. So why wouldn't we want to give that same experience to cannabis consumers?
Right. And Cass said that, that their wife requires higher THC as part of the benefits, they get from cannabis. So that's,
Yeah.
But the point is, do you get higher? Is it better quality? Should it have more value? Those types of things are not.
I want to get higher.
Yeah, it'd be nice to get higher. You can figure out, what works with you and your system better. You've done it long enough. You probably have some ideas of some things that
modify the high. Sometimes you want to be couch locked. Sometimes you want to be intellectually stimulated. Sometimes you want to focus on a motion picture or a date. So there are different ways to get high. And if you know what your terps are that trigger your endocannabinoid system, then you can cater your cannabis to those particular needs.
Right.
But certainly I don't trust when I go into a dispensary and I see wakey, nighty, on the run or.
Well, what do they base that on? There are those groupings of terpenes that we've talked about, and, some people are hip to that, but oftentimes it's not,
And when you're bringing in cannabis and you feel like you have to assign it to one of those 4 groups, exactly how much scrutiny do you give to that cannabis before you put it in that grouping, the wakey wakey, the nighty nighty? You know, it just dumbing down the cannabis purchase experience in order to accommodate, the kind of curious newcomer has always seemed to me to be a misfire. Because as we've mentioned several times on the show, the biggest source of new customers at dispensaries are existing cannabis users in the unregulated market who drift over to the regulated market on occasion, right? So when you're talking about those people, they don't need you to describe the need states or for the store to look like an Apple store. Hi, Sherry. And the fact of the matter is, consumers who are already educated in the issue of cannabis are just looking for you to be honest with them at the counter and give them a good choice and be competitive with what they're already paying for the cannabis itself. They don't require a lot of that extra handling.
Actually, I'm suggesting microdosing cannabis for some people.
Yeah. Well, we talk about the beverage industry. If you look at some of the new beverages that are on the marketplace now, some of them are microdose type styles, 2 gram, 5 gram.
They claim the nano infusions are more absorbable and more readily available. So less,
you don't need as much
to feel it. I don't know.
I've interviewed a bunch of people from the beverage industry, and what they all want to say is, what we're trying to target is for the consumer to have 4, 5, 6 of these over the course of the night in order to get and maintain their buzz. I have not drank 4, 5, or 6 of any one particular beverage in a single evening in a long time. So it seems like, to me, to be sort of a misfire in some of those.
Well, it's an energy drink concept.
Yeah.
If they're referring to Josh Covert, which is possible. He's been on a few times.
Well, he's got that sexy hair. Of course, Sherry's referring.
Where's the mullet? Where's that mighty mullet?
Yeah, I saw the mighty mullet.
He was at Spark in the Park too. Yeah, came with Nancy.
He came to say hello at the
squash off there. Yeah. So he is in Lansing. I mean, let me see. No, he's probably at his home by now, but he was in Lansing probably during the day.
I can hear that thunder.
Yeah, I saw the lightning. I knew that we were going to hear something here in a few seconds.
Right.
It's coming my way.
Mop says a nice educational pamphlet on terps and THC would be a nice thing to give out to customers. Then they can read about it on their own time in the comfort of their home. True. However, it is to a retail store's advantage to not have to spend time analyzing every terpene that's available for the customer. They want to, in many cases, try to accelerate the customer experience so that they're rotating their bud tenders as quickly as possible. So when you invite extra conversation like that, it's not always to the positive when you're.
It's always discretionary,
Now, would it be helpful to have education on it? Absolutely. I think more people should know about terps. I think more people should be educated, and more information should be available for us.
Jen's bringing up the cars that got towed to Spark in the Park. There's places where you're not allowed to park, and
people did. Welcome to
Ypsilanti. And it was bogus. Yeah, I mean, on one hand, you can figure out not to park there, I guess, and maybe there's some responsibility on you. But an event like that, there's a lot of cars. It's people aren't from the area, don't necessarily know how it's laid out.
Right.
And maybe somebody were even willing to take a. Yeah, I agree with Kim too. More people should be doing the terpene profile. Maybe some people were even willing to take a ticket or something, but they were towing cars. And it was expensive to get them out and a hassle and all that kind of stuff. So that does suck. Sorry for people who had to deal with that.
Super aggressive on the part of the city, and it's seemingly unnecessary too.
It's pretty extreme. Yeah, let's start off with. I guess there were some warnings. We had someone on Medical Mondays last night describing that they said, hey, everybody, you got like a half hour. Within a half hour, you got to move your car or else it's going to get towed. And by the time some people were responding, they were getting towed. So it's if that was, I don't. This is just some just regurgitating stuff that was said. I don't really know all the facts that have been supported or researched or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, and a sign might have been laying down, and so people couldn't see they shouldn't park there, etc. So, oh yeah, and there was some of the description last night when somebody went to go get into the car to get their stuff or some money.
He went to go get his wallet, I thought.
Yeah, and the cop said, "Hey, do you have any
Cop,
weapons
but
in there?"
hey,
And he's like, "No, why
right,
would I have weapons?" And he's like, "No, we just have to ask," or or something like that.
right.
So, could have been a little overreach, possibly by the cop. I don't know.
Oh,
Not a good scene all the way around, and not a good.
they
look.
had a lot of police there. I mean, I believe the city made that part of the deal. It's a public park, and they sealed it off. But I can
At Canada Jam, they're hanging around the outskirts, but they didn't
right.
want to
I
do it
mean, there were
often.
two at the front gate. It
Yeah.
was nothing. But they had a lot of security, a lot of cops zipping through on bicycles and golf carts, and it's Ypsilanti. I don't know if it was the city made them do it or the city
They
did
were
it.
nice. I interacted with a few of them in there. They were pretty cool, I
Oh,
guess.
they're
And
decent
nobody was
guys,
like causing an issue or whatever. It's kind of cool to be sitting there smoking a doob, speaking,
right?
talking to one of them. It's not that common, but I had fun, man. I just, I didn't have much energy, but I had a really fun time checking. Saw a lot of people I know and smoked a lot of joints and.
Yeah, it was a long day.
7 hours in the dab contest.
Oh,
Wow.
it was. I got there longer than yeah, but I got there at noon. He was running late. He didn't start till 4:00, and we got there, and we partied all day. I mean, it was continuous party. Hung out, and we had some tables that weren't part of the actual the squash off.
So sure he's laughing at somebody.
We hung out there for a while.
Food trucks?
Party.
Was there good food there anyway?
Food trucks was interesting. There was a few.
I got this noodle dish for Josie and Brenda. Thai noodles.
The noodle guy was there. The Jamaican guy was there.
The hamburger place. Just
hamburger place. But
Big P was there with some sodas, some pop. Were they infused?
I don't know.
I drank one. It was like a nuclear blue color. It was an unnatural flavor and color. It tasted good actually, but
yeah.
Okay. She was laughing about dabbing.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of that.
Wow.
Medicated tacos sound good. Medicated Taco Tuesday.
Yeah, that would be good.
We used to broadcast from a place, down in
Redford.
In Redford at the Cave Radio Broadcasting System, and right next door was a restaurant named Michino's, and we would broadcast on Tuesdays as we do now, and then go over there for their Taco Tuesday special. And after a certain number of weeks, you start to explore the rest of the menu because you get tired of tacos every fucking week. But oh man, how glorious was that? How glorious was that Taco Tuesdays?
Yeah, 25 or $1 taco or 25-cent taco. I don't know,
man. $1.25, something like that.
It was $1.25.
Yeah, so good. I can't even eat one taco anymore. Okay.
And that for a bar place, there's some decent. I kind of like the food there. Somewhat limited, but it was good.
Yeah. Yep, there was always favorites on the menu. I mean, if you're open.
Was it
Tony
April?
asks,
I'd have to look it up because it's been a little bit. But I think April was our common weight person, and she ended up leaving, but she comes on the show every once in a while and hits up the comments and says she's around. I think that's the name. I don't want to. I probably did already screw it up, but
yeah,
not good with names, so don't take it personally
if I don't know your name.
Tony asked about Canapalooza. I'm not sure anything
okay,
about
yeah, let's get that up
for
there.
the rest of the summer. I can't make any plans beyond. Just
So I think I'm going to be there. And sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Rick. I know you're
good. Go ahead.
taking it easy and slow. I hear you, and it is in August, so it's a little ways off. I'm going to be there. I think Meds sponsored John, help him out. He's been trying to do this with goodwill and good intent for many years, and been to a lot of them. And looking forward to hanging out there and having a good time and smoking pot, and listening to music. Probably be pretty small. And yes, I mean, I don't know if you heard it here, but yes, there's definitely thunder going on right outside the window where I am.
Same there.
All right, eggs are expensive. My brother up north has got some chickens.
Making a killing.
Everybody wants them all the time. They did even before there was kind of the shortage. But yeah, I don't know if he's making a killing. He's not producing that many, but people want them. That's for sure. And okay, so hey, good. Assuming Tony and Mark are going to be there and with some hemp stuff. Yeah, this should be cool. I mean, and it's not exactly it's near Lincoln. It's not exactly Lincoln. It's some little town township right next to Lincoln, but
used to be Lincoln. No, used to be Lincoln.
It used
and
to
then
be.
Chevy.
Oh, here we go. Hey, 2,000 a day. Sitting in good shape, man.
God
$8.
damn.
It's $16 a day, man. $16 a day, and you're not even doing the work. All right, time to start raising chickens. It's easy.
Yeah, no shit.
It's easy, no hassle whatsoever. Very little work.
Jamie had goats at one point. He was the owner of goats
Were you?
at his house.
Goats
They were
are cool.
Yeah.
How many goats did you have? 2?
There were 3, and 2 were like small goats, small breed, and 1 was a regular sized goat. They all.
I just want them to mow the lawn.
I'm sunburned. That might be the weird light that I'm sitting in. Although I've also been out in the sun lately too. So there you go. I'm not positive what it is. And look at all them chickens.
I've never really considered raising chickens. I know the
no.
kind of work that's involved with it. It just seems like a lot more than I want to do. Although I believe that Jen, actually, who's been commenting here tonight, is a chicken lover herself.
That's true. Yeah, I think.
A chicken lover. That's a good one.
I think some kind of pets.
Yeah.
Pets and things like that is which is people do that, have a great relationship with them, and that's cool. Sounds like a good time listening to music, smoking pot. It's little known secret that they kind of go together. So does coffee, by the way. I don't mean to let all the cats out of the bag, but cannabis is good with some other stuff, and I'm looking forward to it.
We have Legends of Cannabis coming up too. I believe that's in July, Jamie.
Pet chickens.
Legacy.
Yeah. Is it the Legends?
Legacy.
Legacy.
And that should be cool. A lot of people are going to be there.
Yeah.
Oh, they put the eggs in the dog food. Good protein source for the dogs. You can tell he's growing out. Oh, he's thinking I'm growing outdoor because of the sun. And he grows a lot in Virginia. So that's not, I meant a regular garden. I'm putting a vegetable garden in the yard. So just not cannabis plants. And so I think, Rick, you're going to be there at that, or you're scheduled to be at the Legacy thing to speak like on a panel about, cannabis movement, political stuff.
Right.
As will I. I think Josh might even be there. Al Witt, Captain Kirk, Adam Brook, obviously. Many more. There's a kind of a flyer that's floating around. It's got a lot of names on it. So it should be fun. forward to it. Is that a licensed event, Adam? Oh, I'm sorry to wake you up, man.
No, I'm not asleep. Come on.
Just resting
Oh.
your eyes there.
I'm not even resting my eyes.
Okay.
Is it a licensed event? I don't believe so, but I could.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I know that they are looking at
Yeah.
entering into that world, so I wasn't sure if that was.
I don't believe that currently is a licensed event. But it's also my understanding that you can do both now. Just can't violate the law.
Violate the law.
So caregivers could actually set up at a licensed event. That's what she did. I think she did that last time and didn't. That's why they didn't charge anybody. It was a free event because that complies with the state's requirement to have caregivers and whatnot. Can't charge a ticket if that's where they don't appreciate you.
Let's see what the future holds for how the state decides to approach some of these things.
Yeah, I mean they got to realize that there are not just 100 and 200 person events that could happen. That there are 10,000 person events that could happen if you let them.
And spontaneous events too. This whole 90
Right.
to 120 days out planning the event means that we really can't respond to anything that's a national event, nothing like that. So it's very restrictive.
Parking.
Well, wrapping it up, I'm not sure.
Parking's always for sale. That's how these people make their money.
Is this because of the last event?
They charge
for
parking. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of the events nowadays charge for parking.
I worked an event with it was a licensed event with Josie, in which for Glenn we got to whatever we could collect from parking in the parking lot, we got to
Right.
Donate to the organization. So people didn't mind then, but
No.
And medicated pork loin. So make sure you think about that.
Nice random thought just tossed out there. That's awesome.
I have I like the that's a clock, right?
That's a cuckoo clock. That's like 2 minutes and some seconds before it's actually supposed to go
I
off.
believe it's actually
Good lightning.
And there's some more thunder. I knew it was coming. I saw the lightning.
Yeah, I saw the lightning. It's coming.
Well, it's about wrap up time. Hey, Jay.
It is. Adam, I know you're ready to unload some serious wisdom here to send people off with.
No, I have nothing to say.
All right.
No, this summer there'll be a lot of events, and I think people should check them out. They're all over the state, and it's a great way to meet people, get involved, and see a bunch of cannabis because there's tons of it everywhere.
Lots of good cannabis. Oh, yeah, here you go. 2 minute warning, cuckoo clock. That's about right. Yeah. Just appreciate Cass coming on. I'll get Brandy one of these times. Get an update from her. A longer interview or a longer discussion with Uncle Stoner. And I think next week I'll be at one of the stores again, and we have just let people know it's 2 more Meds Cafes coming, Big Rapids. Kind of doing some soft sales up there, getting ready for a larger opening toward the end of the month, 24th, 25th. And to be followed by Sheboygan, and then other stuff on the horizon. So exciting times.
Damn.
That was
And
Reagan.
we're hey, maybe the power is no, the power's not going up. I was looking around, didn't see any sign of it for a second, but there is some things on it over there. But anyway, so yeah, I really appreciate the discussion. And Rick, if you don't mind, wrap us up.
Well, we talked about some important stuff right at the start of the show and talked about a disease that affects cannabis plants and could potentially affect those in Michigan and really have a bad effect on the industry and especially the home grower too, because once you get it, very difficult to get rid of it too. Secondly, though, we also talked about some federal stuff, and Cass related her trip to Washington, D.C., and her interaction with some of the elected officials there, where their priorities were, and also the likelihood of positive change coming out of the House of Representatives, too. We had a lot of conversation, too. Uncle Stoner's always fun. I wish we had it for a longer segment. But rewind this baby. Take a look at some of the excellent segments that we had early on. I think you'll really enjoy some of that conversation. Maybe we lagged a little bit at the end, but we kicked ass to start off. So
Good info.
that's my message.
Good info.
Awesome. I mentioned that Dr. Levy alone was in Virginia and he's in Vermont. My fault, so I make that correction. But
Still
excellent
got
one.
the letter right.
Yeah, got the V right.
There you go.
But of course, excellent summation again from Rick. Thank you very much. Jazz Cabbage Cafe. See you guys.
Take care.
See you